Welcome to the Wilma H. Schiermeier Olentangy River Wetland Research Park. This section of Bottomland Forest has had some management activities that are consistent with the concepts of ecological restoration. However, it currently lacks an official restoration plan. Every restoration project involves unique challenges, resources, stakeholders, and ecosystem dynamics. In this video, we propose a restoration plan for this small area of bottomland forest that considers ecological theory as well as our site's historical, current, and future dynamics.
The Wetland Research Park was constructed in 1993 through 94, led by W.J. Mitch as an experimental wetland facility to inform mitigation activities for the Ohio EPA in lieu fee wetland mitigation program. Prior to its conversion, the area was used by Ohio State for experimental agriculture. To the west, a stretch of bottomland floodplain forest was converted to comply with the in lieu fee wetland mitigation program. In the late 1990s, the Ohio Department of Transportation purchased credits to offset a development project. The site was then monitored for 5 years as specified in the mitigation plan. Since the end of the monitoring period, woody plantings and invasive removals have been conducted in some areas, though a consistent official restoration plan has yet to be created.
Currently, the canopy is dominated by box elder and eastern cottonwood, though it is a mixed community with walnut, hackberry, and black cherry also conspicuous. Along the river, American elm and mature sycamores dominate. In adjacent areas of the park, red maple and black willow are dominant, with some white pines, catalpas, and eastern red cedars intermix.
Perhaps the most conspicuous challenge facing this site is the abundance of invasive plants present. The shrub layer is currently dominated by Lonicera mackii, also known as Amur or bush honeysuckle. Between early February and early May, the herbaceous layer, informally referred to as ground cover, is dominated by the ephemeral Ficaria verna. An important component of restoration is the reduction of invasive propagule pressure. Propagule pressure is the relative quantity of viable reproductive structures, such as seeds, spores, and bulbils, that are likely to disperse into a system due to various factors. At our site, flooding, wind, vegetative spread, and human-mediated dispersal all contribute to propagule pressure from invasive species. The primary method of reducing invasive propagule pressure will be to remove invasive species from areas adjacent to the site. The public can also be educated about potential accidental spread through informational signage. Channelization, urbanization, and agricultural tiling all contribute to increased water flow to the Olentangy River. This contributes to higher frequency, intensity, and duration of floods and can cause stream bank erosion, such as that visible at our site. Further assessment is needed to determine the extent and significance of the erosion present at our site.
It is important that our existing ecosystems be preserved and that new ones are created. It is equally important that community members are educated about and encouraged to participate in restoration. One of the social trade-offs that must be balanced at our site is allowing recreation to continue in the adjacent paved trail while mitigating the impacts of disturbance and invasive species dispersal exacerbated by this usage.
How do we define ecosystem function? Should we place certain functions as carbon sequestration and erosion control over others, such as plant and animal interactions and soil microbial community health? How much emphasis should we put on the economic value of ecosystems relative to the spiritual, social, and cultural value? Does pristine, untouched wilderness imply the absence of any human impact? If so, is it realistic to create ecosystems that are modeled after those without human interaction? There are no singular correct solutions to any of these questions. However, by using the scientific method and consulting with stakeholders, we can make ecologically informed decisions about how to proceed in our restoration activities.
Several reference sites have been identified based on a collection of similar current and historical ecosystem dynamics. Our site is a bottomland forest with components of a floodplain forest. Similar sites around Columbus include the Alum Creek riparian and floodplain areas along the Rocks and Roots Trail, and High Banks riparian forest areas. Lastly, the lowland areas of the Whetstone Park forest areas can serve as reference sites. These sites have a similar species mix to our site, with a few additional species that could be incorporated to increase biodiversity and wildlife value.
It is crucial to develop restoration objectives and interventions based on both a theoretical understanding of the ecological literature and a more applied knowledge obtained by actively observing the restoration and reference sites. Our overarching long-term goal is to create a self-sustaining bottomland floodplain forest. We will accomplish this by decreasing erosion. In the long term, insignificant amounts of annual soil loss will occur from the riverbank. In the long term, native herbaceous plants are functionally diverse and are the dominant herbaceous community members at our site. Also, host plants to specialist fauna such as the spicebush swallowtail are established and frequently observed to interact with these benefactors. Educational elements are incorporated and readily used. And lastly, the aquatic habitat is of significantly higher quality. This is quantified by dramatically increased native diversity and ecosystem functioning. Our medium-term goals are to increase riverbank stabilization using native saplings as a vegetative means, and chain logs and brush piles and/or rocks as a mechanical method. We will also incorporate biannual educational tours to the site and conduct repeated site surveys to track ecosystem changes and restoration success. Our short-term goals are to reduce lesser celandine's annual maximum cover to 10% of site ground area. Also, 95% of mature honeysuckle will be removed from the site. Long-term partnerships will be established with local groups such as Society for Ecological Restoration at Ohio State, Friends of the Lower Olentangy Watershed, and other officials at the Wetland Research Park. These groups will conduct partnered biannual invasive removals and annual native plantings for 5 years. After 5 years, they will be reduced to annual removal sweeps and plantings every 2 years. Additionally, an assessment will be conducted as to the status of erosion and the health of the aquatic community.
Throughout this video, we have discussed the history of the restoration site and the Wetland Research Park. We described the ecological challenges faced for this project, along with the reference information used to develop the restoration plan. Once the ecologically informed plan has been developed and accepted by stakeholders, the restoration can begin. Throughout the project, stakeholders can change, so the restoration activities must adapt to their new needs and resources. Also, having a clear and ecologically informed plan is crucial. Ecosystems are unpredictable and changes will have to be made based on how the system changes throughout the years in response to restoration interventions. This means that consistent monitoring and open collaborative discussion are necessary to adapt to the changing ecosystem.
Happy, happy,